They told me the aircraft didn't exist, but I flew it at Mach 6 at the edge of space, where I discovered something that still haunts me 15 years later. The Aurora wasn't built by humans, at least not entirely. And now, after receiving a photograph from a dead man, I'm breaking my silence before it's too late.
My name is Captain Marcus Webb, and in 2008, I was one of the Air Force's top test pilots stationed at Edwards Air Force Base in California. I'd logged over 2,000 hours in experimental aircraft, everything from next-generation fighters to classified reconnaissance planes. I thought I'd seen it all. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning in March when everything changed. I'd just finished a routine test flight when my commanding officer called me into his office. That alone wasn't unusual, but the two men in dark suits standing beside him were. They didn't introduce themselves. No names, no agency affiliations, just cold, assessing stares. "Captain Webb," one of them said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Your record is impressive. Top marks in every evaluation, exceptional performance under pressure, and according to your psych assessments, you're extremely good at keeping secrets." I glanced at my CO, looking for guidance. He simply nodded, his face unreadable. "We have an opportunity for you, a special assignment. If you accept, you'll be transferred immediately to a classified facility. You won't be able to tell anyone where you're going, not your family, not your friends. As far as they're concerned, you'll be on an extended deployment overseas." "What kind of assignment?" I asked. The first man leaned forward. "The kind that doesn't exist on any official record. The kind that will test every skill you have and push you beyond anything you've experienced. You'll be flying technology that won't see public acknowledgement for decades, if ever." My heart raced. Every test pilot dreams of this moment. The tap on the shoulder, the invitation to the inner circle. But there was something in their eyes that made me hesitate. This wasn't just about flying experimental aircraft. This was something else. "How long is the assignment?" I asked. "Minimum 3 years, possibly longer depending on project progression." "And if I say no?" The second man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Then we thank you for your time, and you continue your career here at Edwards. But this conversation never happened, and this opportunity never comes again." They gave me 24 hours to decide. I spent that night walking the perimeter of the base, staring up at the stars, thinking about my ex-wife Sarah and our 8-year-old daughter Emily. The divorce had been finalized 6 months earlier, partly because of my constant deployments and classified assignments. Emily barely understood why Daddy couldn't talk about his work. But this was different. This was the pinnacle. The kind of program that only a handful of pilots in history ever get selected for. How could I say no? The next morning, I walked into my CO's office and told the suited men I was in. "Good," the first man said, standing. "Pack a single bag, personal items only. You leave tonight. A car will pick you up at 2200 hours." "Where am I going?" The second man's expression remained neutral. "Groom Lake, Nevada. Welcome to Dreamland, Captain." I felt my stomach drop. Area 51, the facility that officially didn't exist, the place conspiracy theorists obsessed over,
where alien technology was being reverse engineered. I had always assumed most of it was nonsense, disinformation to hide conventional black projects. That night, as promised, a black SUV with tinted windows picked me up. No conversation, no explanation. We drove through the darkness for hours. I tried to track our route, but after multiple turns through the desert, I lost all sense of direction. Finally, just before dawn, we approached a checkpoint that appeared out of nowhere. Armed guards, barriers, warning signs about deadly force. Beyond that, nothing but empty desert and distant mountains painted orange by the rising sun. The driver spoke for the first time. "Welcome to Dreamland, Captain. Your life just became a lot more complicated."
The security protocols at Area 51 made every other classified facility I'd worked at look like a public library. After passing through the outer checkpoint, we drove another 30 minutes across barren desert before reaching the actual base. What I saw defied every aerial photograph and satellite image I'd ever seen of the place. The surface facilities were deliberately mundane. A few hangars, some administrative buildings, the famous runway. But that was just theater. The real base existed underground. They processed me in a stark, windowless room. Retinal scans, fingerprints, voice analysis, and a polygraph test that lasted 3 hours. They asked questions I didn't expect. Do you believe in extraterrestrial life? Have you ever experienced missing time? Do you have any unexplained scars or memories from childhood? When I asked why these questions mattered for a test pilot position, the examiner simply said, "Answer the questions, Captain." After processing, a stern-looking woman in her 50s named Catherine Reeves escorted me to an elevator. She wore a badge with clearance codes I'd never seen before. We descended, and descended, and descended. My ears popped twice. We had to be at least 15 stories underground. "Level 7, Dr. Reeves announced as the doors opened. "This is where you'll spend most of your time. Your quarters, briefing rooms, simulators, and hangar access are all on this level. You are not authorized for levels 8 through 12. Don't ask what's down there, and don't ever attempt to access them. People who violate that rule disappear from the program permanently." The underground facility was enormous, a subterranean city carved into the desert bedrock. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled recycled, metallic. We passed laboratories with windows that immediately frosted over as we approached, hiding whatever was inside. Personnel moved through corridors with purpose, none of them making eye contact. Dr. Reeves led me to a briefing room where 5 other pilots sat waiting. They looked like me, mid-30s, military backgrounds, eyes that had seen combat and classified operations. No one spoke. No one even nodded in greeting. The paranoia was tangible. A man in his 60s entered, wearing a plain gray suit. His presence commanded immediate attention. "I'm Director Vincent Kozlov. I run the Aurora Project. For the next 3 years minimum, I own you. Your lives, your futures, your very existence depends on following my rules precisely." He clicked a remote, and the lights dimmed. A projection appeared on the wall, a sleek, black aircraft unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It looked more like a spacecraft than a plane, with a tapered fuselage, minimal wings, and an exotic propulsion system visible at the rear. "Gentlemen, meet the SR-91 Aurora, hypersonic reconnaissance aircraft. Cruising speed, Mach 5.5. Maximum velocity, Mach 6.2. Operational ceiling, 135,000 feet.
This aircraft can photograph any target on Earth within 2 hours of launch and return without ever being detected by conventional radar. My breath caught. If this was real, it represented a quantum leap in aviation technology. But something felt off. The aircraft's design suggested capabilities beyond reconnaissance. The Aurora uses a pulse detonation wave engine. It creates a distinctive contrail pattern at high altitude, the pulsing lights people have misidentified as UFOs for the past 20 years. We've encouraged that misidentification. Let conspiracy theorists obsess over aliens. It keeps them from discovering the truth. One pilot raised his hand. "Sir, what's our mission profile?" Kozlov's expression darkened. "You're being trained for high-altitude reconnaissance missions over denied territory. But understand this, the Aurora is not just a spy plane. It's a first strike platform. In the event of certain global scenarios, you may be called upon to deliver payloads at hypersonic speeds to targets that conventional missiles cannot reach in time." The room fell silent. We weren't just test pilots. We were being trained as weapons delivery specialists for a craft that could strike anywhere on Earth faster than any defense system could respond. Training begins tomorrow at 0600 hours. You'll start in simulators. Only the 2 best performers will ever sit in an actual Aurora cockpit. The stakes are absolute. Questions? I had 1,000 questions, but something in Kozlov's eyes told me to stay quiet. "Good," he said. "Dismissed. Welcome to the most classified program in American history. If you succeed, no one will ever know your names. If you fail, you'll be erased from all records as if you never existed." As we filed out, I caught Dr. Reeves watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It looked almost like pity.
The simulator training was brutal. 16 hours a day for 3 weeks straight, learning to pilot an aircraft that behaved unlike anything I'd ever flown. The Aurora didn't just fly, it punched through the atmosphere like a bullet through water. Every instinct I developed over 15 years of flying had to be unlearned and rebuilt. The physics were insane. At Mach 6, you're covering a mile every second. Your reaction time becomes almost irrelevant. The aircraft's computer systems make thousands of micro adjustments before your brain can even process what's happening. You're not really flying the Aurora, you're negotiating with it, suggesting a direction and trusting its artificial intelligence to keep you alive. 2 pilots washed out in the first week. One had a panic attack during a simulated engine failure at 120,000 feet. The other simply couldn't adapt to the speed. His mind kept trying to fly it like a conventional aircraft, and in the simulator, that got him killed 17 times. That left 4 of us. The competition was unspoken but fierce. Only 2 would fly the real thing. On day 23, Dr. Reeves came to my quarters at midnight. "Get dressed, Captain Webb. Director Kozlov wants to see you. Hangar 18, level 9. "I thought I wasn't authorized for below level 7, I said. "You weren't. Now you are. Let's go." We took the elevator down 2 more levels. When the doors opened, I stepped into a cathedral of technology. The hangar was massive, easily 3 football fields long, carved directly into the mountain. And there, suspended on hydraulic lifts under banks of lights, was the Aurora. The photographs hadn't done it justice. The aircraft seemed alive, organic almost, its black surface absorbing light like a predator's skin. It measured about 90 feet from nose to tail, with a narrow 40-foot wingspan. The cockpit was a sleek bubble that seemed to melt into the fuselage. But it was the engine I couldn't stop staring at. A massive pulse detonation system that looked more like something from a science fiction movie than actual aviation technology.
3 other pilots stood near me, all of us silent, reverential. This wasn't just an aircraft. It was art. It was power. It was the future. Director Kozlov appeared from beneath the aircraft, wiping his hands on a cloth. Beautiful, isn't she? Took us 23 years to perfect. Cost more than the entire Apollo program. And only 12 people in the world are authorized to know it exists. He walked toward us slowly, studying our faces. You've all performed exceptionally in simulators, but simulation and reality are very different things. At Mach 6, if something goes wrong, you have approximately 3 seconds to make the right decision. Make the wrong one, and you'll create a debris field 50 miles long. Kozlov stopped in front of me. Captain Webb, you have the highest simulator scores. You also have something the others lack. You've survived actual aircraft emergencies. That experience matters. You will be the first to fly her. My heart hammered against my ribs, pride mixed with terror in equal measure. Sir, when? I managed to ask. Tomorrow, 0400 hours. We have a 4-hour window when our satellites show no foreign surveillance assets overhead. You'll take her up to 100,000 feet, run through basic maneuvers, then land. Flight time, 37 minutes. Any questions? 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, but I focused on the most important one. What about the payload capabilities you mentioned? Will I be testing weapon systems? Kozlov's expression hardened. No, not tomorrow, but you should know what you're sitting on top of. He gestured to a technician who activated a wall display. The schematic showed the Aurora's internal structure. Behind the cockpit was a weapons bay capable of carrying various payloads, but one option made my blood run cold. A single warhead with a yield designation I'd only seen in classified nuclear briefings. The Aurora can deliver a tactical nuclear device to any target on Earth within 2 hours. It can penetrate any airspace undetected and strike before enemy systems even know it's there. That's why this program exists. Not for reconnaissance. That's secondary. The Aurora is a deterrent, a first strike capability that ensures if someone launches against us, we can respond before their missiles even leave the ground. I stared at the aircraft with new understanding. This wasn't just advanced technology. This was a weapon that could start or end World War III. Get some rest, Captain. Tomorrow you make history. And remember, if you tell anyone about this, even after you leave the program, you'll spend the rest of your life in a cell so deep the sun is just a memory. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my quarters staring at the ceiling, thinking about Emily, wondering if the world she'd inherit would be shaped by the aircraft I was about to pilot, wondering if I was a hero or something much darker. At 03:45 hours, I got dressed and headed to Hangar 18. It was time to fly the Aurora.
The pre-flight briefing lasted 2 hours. Every system, every contingency, every abort procedure drilled into my head until I could recite them backwards. Dr. Reeves monitored my vitals. Heart rate elevated but stable. Blood pressure normal. I was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. The pressure suit alone took 30 minutes to put on. It wasn't like the flight suits I was used to. This was closer to a spacesuit with its own life support system, reinforced joints, and a helmet that sealed with an ominous hiss. At the altitudes the Aurora flew, the air was too thin to breathe. If the cockpit lost pressure, I'd have maybe 10 seconds of consciousness without this suit. "Comms check," the technician said. "Loud and clear," I responded, my voice sounding strange through the helmet speakers. They escorted me across the hangar floor. Each step felt surreal. The Aurora sat ready, fuel loaded, systems online. A stairway led up to the cockpit. As I climbed, I noticed scorch marks on the fuselage near the engine, evidence of previous flights, previous pilots who'd sat where I was about to sit. The cockpit was cramped but sophisticated.
Displays covered every surface, showing engine status, altitude, speed, fuel levels, and a dozen other parameters I'd memorized. The seat molded to my body as I settled in. Technicians connected my suit to the aircraft systems, running final checks. "You're plugged in, Captain," one of them said. "The Aurora takes care of most things automatically, but she likes to know there's a human in the loop. Trust the systems, but trust your instincts too." Director Kozlov's voice came through my helmet. "Captain Webb, this is Control. How do you feel?" "Ready, sir." "Good. Remember, this is a familiarization flight. No heroics. Follow the flight plan exactly. The aircraft will do most of the work. Your job is to stay calm and get a feel for her." "Understood." The technicians cleared away. The cockpit canopy lowered with a hydraulic wind, sealing me inside. The displays came alive with pre-flight checks running automatically. Green lights cascaded across the screens. The Aurora was ready. "Cleared for engine start," Control said. I initiated the sequence. The pulse detonation engine came alive with a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard. A rhythmic, thunderous drumbeat that shook the entire aircraft. Each detonation sent a shockwave through my body. This wasn't the smooth roar of a jet engine. This was controlled explosions happening dozens of times per second. "All systems green," I reported. "Ready for taxi." The massive hangar doors opened, revealing a tunnel that sloped upward. The Aurora rolled forward on its landing gear, and we began the ascent toward the surface. The tunnel was 3 miles long, emerging far from the main base at a hidden runway that satellite imagery would show as empty desert. Dawn was breaking as we reached the surface. The sky glowed purple and orange. For a moment, I just sat there, absorbing the reality of what was about to happen. "Tower to Aurora 1, you are cleared for takeoff. Wind negligible, temperature nominal. You have the runway, Captain." I advanced the throttle. The pulse detonation engine's rhythm increased, faster and faster, until it became a continuous roar. The Aurora surged forward, acceleration pressing me back into the seat. 20 seconds later, we hit rotation speed. I pulled back gently on the stick, and the nose lifted. We left the ground. The acceleration was insane. Within 30 seconds, we were supersonic. Within 90 seconds, Mach 3. The desert below became a blur, then disappeared entirely as we climbed into the thin upper atmosphere. "Passing 60,000 feet, I reported. Mach 4.2 and climbing." "Copy that, Aurora 1. How's she handling?" "Like a dream," I said, and meant it. Despite the violence of the engine, the aircraft itself flew smoothly, responding to the slightest input. The computer made thousands of micro-adjustments, keeping us stable even as we punched through the edge of space. At 80,000 feet, the sky turned from blue to deep purple. At 95,000 feet, I could see the curvature of the Earth. And at 100,000 feet, where few aircraft had ever flown, I leveled off and looked out at a view that took my breath away. Below me, the entire American Southwest spread out like a map. I could see mountain ranges, cities, the glint of lakes reflecting the rising sun. Above me, the stars were visible even though it was technically daytime. I was at the edge of space, traveling over a mile per second in an aircraft that officially didn't exist. "Aurora 1, begin maneuver sequence," Control instructed. I ran through the planned exercises, banking turns at Mach 5.5, altitude adjustments, power variations. The Aurora responded beautifully. I was starting to understand what the engineers had created. This wasn't just an aircraft, it was a new form of flight entirely. Then, everything went wrong. A warning alarm screamed in my helmet. Engine pressure dropping, temperature spiking. The pulse detonation rhythm became irregular, stuttering. "Control, I have a malfunction," I shouted. "Engine destabilizing." "Aurora 1, initiate emergency descent, now." But the aircraft wasn't responding to my inputs anymore. The nose pitched up violently. We were climbing when we should be descending, accelerating when we should be slowing down. The G-forces crushed me into my seat. My vision tunneled. I was seconds from blacking out, and at Mach 6, at the edge of space, with an aircraft out of control, I realized I might not make it home.
Training took over. I forced my hand to the emergency override panel, fingers fumbling against the G-forces that felt like an elephant sitting on my chest. The Aurora was climbing through 115,000 feet, well beyond its designed ceiling. The airframe groaned and creaked around me, sounds no aircraft should ever make. "Aurora 1, respond!" Control's voice crackled with static. At this altitude, even our encrypted communications were breaking down. I managed to flip the manual override switch. The computer's grip on the aircraft released, and suddenly I had full control, which, at Mach 6 and climbing, was both a blessing and a curse. Every instinct screamed to pull back, to slow down, but at these speeds, the wrong move would tear the Aurora apart. "Control! I have manual control," I gasped, fighting the G-forces. "Attempting recovery." I reduced throttle incrementally, feeling the pulse detonation engine's rhythm slow. The nose began to drop, degree by agonizing degree. The altitude numbers on my display finally stopped climbing, 122,400 feet. I'd gone higher than any military aircraft in history, completely by accident. The descent was controlled chaos. I had to bleed off speed without creating too much stress on the airframe. Too fast a descent and the heat would cook me alive. Too slow and I'd run out of fuel before reaching a safe landing zone. At 90,000 feet, with speed down to Mach 4, I finally had time to assess what had happened. The engine diagnostics showed a cascade failure in the fuel injection system. One of the detonation chambers had misfired, causing a chain reaction that sent the engine into an uncontrolled acceleration cycle. "Aurora 1, what's your status?" Dr. Reeves's voice came through, tight with concern. "Stable for now, but I've got damage. I can see warning lights across half my systems. Requesting emergency landing clearance." "Negative," Director Kozlov's voice cut in. "You're too far north. If you land at Groom Lake, satellite surveillance will track your approach. They'll have infrared signatures, radar anomalies, everything we've worked to hide." "Sir, I have maybe 20 minutes of fuel left." "Then you'll land at Site 7, transmitting coordinates now." A location appeared on my navigation display, an auxiliary airstrip I'd never heard of, deep in the Nevada desert, 180 miles northwest of Area 51. "Copy that," I said, turning toward the coordinates. The approach was the most stressful flying of my life. The Aurora wasn't designed for graceful landings under the best circumstances. With damaged systems, it was like trying to land a meteor. I kept the speed high, not trusting the aircraft to respond correctly if I slowed too much. Site 7 appeared in the desert, a single runway, no visible structures, just empty sand and scrub brush. As I lined up for final approach, I noticed something odd. Heat shimmer around the runway that didn't match the morning temperature. And were those blast marks on the sand? No time to wonder. I was committed. The touchdown was rough. The landing gear shrieked in protest. The pulse detonation engine sputtered and died completely. I engaged the braking system, and the Aurora screamed down the runway, eating up distance at a terrifying rate. I stopped with maybe 300 feet of runway left. For a long moment, I just sat there, hands shaking, heart hammering, sweat pouring down my face inside the helmet. I'd nearly died. I'd lost control of the most classified aircraft in existence at the edge of space, and somehow I'd survived. The cockpit canopy opened. Instead of technicians, 3 armed security personnel surrounded the aircraft, weapons drawn. "Step out slowly, Captain Webb," one of them ordered. Confused, I complied. My legs nearly gave out as I climbed down.
The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me weak and disoriented. A black helicopter landed nearby, rotors still spinning. Director Kozlov emerged, his face darker than I'd ever seen it. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the Aurora. Get him in the helicopter and get a recovery team here immediately. I want this aircraft underground before the next satellite pass. As they rushed me toward the helicopter, I glanced back at the Aurora. That's when I saw it. The fuselage panels near the engine had partially melted from the heat, but underneath the damaged exterior, I could see something that made no sense. The internal structure wasn't metal. It was something else, something that seemed to shimmer and shift in the sunlight, almost organic looking. And there were markings, symbols that I didn't recognize, definitely not English or any language I'd ever seen. "Eyes forward, Captain," the guard snapped, shoving me toward the helicopter. We lifted off, banking away from the site. I looked down and watched as what appeared to be solid ground near the runway split open, massive doors camouflaged to look like desert sand. The Aurora was being lowered into an underground facility I hadn't known existed. In the helicopter, Kozlov sat across from me, studying my face. "What did you see, Captain?" The aircraft, under the panels, that wasn't..." "What did you see?" he repeated, his voice cold. I understood then. This was a test, not of my flying skills, but of my discretion, of my loyalty. "I saw a damaged aircraft that needs repair, sir. Nothing else." Kozlov held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Good, because if you'd seen anything else, we'd have a serious problem. The Aurora Project has components that are proprietary, highly proprietary. Questions about their origin are above your clearance level and above mine." My blood ran cold. Components with unknown origins, symbols that weren't human. The strange questions during my initial interview about extraterrestrial life and missing time suddenly made horrible sense. "We're not flying something we built, are we?" Kozlov's expression remained neutral, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or regret. "You flew brilliantly today, Captain Webb. You saved $1 trillion asset and maintained operational security. But you're done with flight operations. Effective immediately, you're reassigned to analysis and debriefing. You'll never sit in an Aurora cockpit again." "Sir, this conversation is over." As the helicopter carried us back toward Area 51, I stared out the window at the empty desert, my mind reeling. I'd been recruited to test pilot humanity's most advanced aircraft, but I'd just discovered we might not have built it at all. They kept me in isolation for 72 hours. A windowless room on level 8, a level I'd been explicitly told I'd never access. No phone, no communication, just meals delivered by guards who wouldn't make eye contact. Dr. Reeves visited once to check my vitals, but she wouldn't answer any of my questions. On the 4th day, they came for me. 2 guards escorted me to a conference room I'd never seen before. The walls were lined with some kind of metallic fabric that hummed faintly. Signal dampening, I realized. Whatever happened in this room stayed in this room. Director Kozlov sat at the head of a long table, flanked by 2 people I didn't recognize. A woman in her 40s with steel gray hair and a military bearing, and a man who looked like he'd never seen sunlight, pale and nervous, constantly adjusting his glasses. "Sit down, Captain Webb," Kozlov said. I sat. The woman studied me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "I'm Colonel Sandra Vance. I oversee security protocols for all deep black programs in this facility. And this is Dr. Raymond Chen, chief engineer on the Aurora Project. Dr. Chen nodded but said nothing, his fingers drumming anxiously on the table. We've reviewed your flight data extensively. Your performance during the malfunction was exceptional. You saved the aircraft and maintained operational security during a critical incident. However, we have concerns about what you observed at Site 7. I saw a damaged aircraft, I said carefully. Nothing more. Don't insult our intelligence, Captain. Vance slid a photograph across the table. It showed the Aurora's exposed internal structure, the same shimmer I'd seen, the strange symbols clearly visible. Our security footage shows you staring at this for approximately 4 seconds before being redirected. You saw it. The question is what you think you saw. My mouth dried. There was no right answer here. Dr. Chen spoke for the first time, his voice quiet and strained. Captain Webb, I'm going to tell you something that violates about a dozen security protocols, but Colonel Vance believes you've earned the truth, or at least a version of it. He pulled out a tablet and brought up technical schematics. The Aurora SR-91 is not entirely human technology. Approximately 60% of its design is ours, conventional aerospace engineering pushed to its absolute limits. But the engine, the materials in the primary structure, and certain control systems, those came from somewhere else. The room seemed to tilt. Hearing it confirmed was different than suspecting it. In 1989, a recovery team retrieved materials from a crash site in the Nevada desert. Not the Roswell incident, that was something different. This was a smaller craft, heavily damaged, no occupants, living or dead. But the technology was decades, maybe centuries beyond our capabilities. We've been reverse engineering it ever since, Kozlov added. The Aurora Project is our most successful application of that technology, but it's not the only one. There are other programs, other projects, all based on what we recovered. I struggled to process this. Why are you telling me this? Because you've seen too much to be fed a comfortable lie, Kozlov said. And because we need you to understand the stakes. What you discovered isn't just classified, it's existential. If the public knew we've been flying aircraft with non-human technology, it would trigger global panic. If our adversaries knew, it would start a war. They'd assume we have advantages we might not actually possess. So what happens now? I asked. Vance leaned forward. Now you sign a non-disclosure agreement that makes your previous security clearances look like library cards. You'll be reassigned to a monitoring position here. Analysis work, no flight operations. You'll never speak about what you know, not even to other personnel in this facility. You'll live the rest of your career and life knowing this secret and never breathing a word of it. And if I refuse? The room went silent. Vance's expression hardened. Then you become a security risk, Captain, and we don't tolerate security risks in programs like this. You'll be detained indefinitely under national security statutes that allow us to hold you without trial, without legal representation, in a facility where no one will ever find you. Dr. Chen looked away, uncomfortable. Even Kozlov seemed troubled by the threat, but he didn't contradict it. That's not a choice, I said. No, it's not, Vance agreed. But we're giving you the illusion of one because we respect what you did up there. You could have panicked. You could have died. Instead, you brought that aircraft home. That matters. They slid the papers across the table. Page after page of legal language that essentially said I'd forfeit my humanity, my freedom, possibly my life, if I ever spoke about what I knew. I thought about Emily. She was 9 now, growing up without her father around. If I signed this, I'd be locked into this facility for years, maybe decades. But if I refused, I'd disappear completely. At least this way, someday, I might see her again. I picked up the pen and signed. "Good," Vance said, collecting the documents. "Welcome to the real Area 51, Captain Webb, the place where we prepare for a future that most people can't imagine." Over the next 2 years, I worked in analysis, reviewing flight data, studying anomalies in the recovered technology, watching other pilots fly the Aurora. 3 more aircraft were built. The program expanded. I learned things that made the Aurora revelation seem almost mundane. Other technologies, other projects, other secrets buried in the levels below. But I also learned something more disturbing. The Aurora wasn't just a reconnaissance platform or a first strike weapon. It was a test. Dr. Chen let it slip one night after too many cups of coffee in the analysis lab. He said, "We're preparing for contact, not if, but when." The things we recovered didn't just crash here randomly. They were scouts, probes. And whatever sent them knows we found them, knows we're using their technology. The Aurora Project isn't about spying on other countries, Captain. It's about showing whoever's out there that we're not helpless, that if they come back, we can fight. That's when I knew I had to get out. Not just out of the program, but out before I became something I didn't recognize, before the secrets consumed what was left of my humanity. It took me 6 more months to engineer my exit, a medical discharge based on stress-related issues that weren't entirely fabricated. They watched me for another year after I left, monitoring my communications, my movements, making sure I kept quiet. And I did. For 15 years, I kept quiet. Until now.
I'm breaking my silence now because something has changed. 3 weeks ago, I received a package at my home in rural Montana, where I've lived quietly since leaving the program. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, recent, high resolution, taken from altitude. It showed Site 7, the auxiliary base where I'd made my emergency landing 15 years ago. But the image wasn't from a satellite. The angle was wrong, the resolution too perfect. It was taken from an Aurora, and written on the back in handwriting I recognized as Dr. Chen's. "They're coming back. You were right to leave. Tell the truth before it's too late." I haven't heard from Raymond Chen since 2011. According to official records, he died in a car accident in 2012. But this photograph was dated 3 weeks ago. For 15 years, I've lived with the weight of what I know. I've watched my daughter grow up, gotten remarried, built a quiet life fixing small aircraft at a rural airstrip. I've seen countless reports of UFO sightings, strange lights in the sky, unexplained phenomena, and I've known that at least some of them were Aurora flights, their pulse detonation contrails mistaken for alien spacecraft. But some weren't. Some were actually something else. The technology we reverse engineered wasn't perfect. Dr. Chen once told me that we understood maybe 30% of how it actually worked. We could replicate the effects, but not the underlying principles. It was like giving a medieval blacksmith a computer chip and asking him to reproduce it with the tools and knowledge of his time. He might create something that looks similar, but it wouldn't truly function the same way. The Aurora Project succeeded
because we didn't try to fully understand the recovered technology. We just copied it, integrated it with our own systems, and hoped it would work. And it did, mostly. But there were incidents, malfunctions that killed pilots, crashes that had to be covered up, strange effects that we couldn't explain. One pilot reported hearing voices during high-altitude flights. Another saw lights keeping pace with his aircraft at Mach 6, moving in ways that defied physics. A third landed with his aircraft covered in a substance that dissolved within hours, leaving no trace. These incidents were classified beyond even the Aurora program itself, filed away in reports I only glimpsed briefly. The real reason I was grounded wasn't just because I saw too much. It was because during my emergency flight, at 122,000 feet, something happened that they couldn't explain. For approximately 43 seconds, according to the flight data, my aircraft's telemetry went completely dead. No signal, no communication, nothing. From my perspective, nothing unusual occurred. Those 43 seconds felt normal. But the data showed my aircraft should have crashed during that blackout. The trajectory was impossible. When telemetry resumed, I was somehow on the correct flight path, as if those seconds had never happened. They ran every test imaginable on me afterward. Brain scans, blood work, psychological evaluations. They found nothing abnormal, which somehow made it worse. Colonel Vance believed I'd made contact with something during those 43 seconds, that whatever technology powered the Aurora had attracted attention. Dr. Chen's photograph and message suggest he believes the same thing. And if he's right, if they're coming back, then the public deserves to know that our most advanced military technology isn't entirely ours, that we've been playing with forces we don't understand, that the government has been preparing not for conventional war, but for something far beyond our comprehension. I know what releasing this information means. I'll likely be arrested, charged under national security laws that allow indefinite detention. My family will be questioned. My life, as I know it, will end. But I'm 61 years old now, and I've carried this secret long enough. The Aurora Project is real. I flew it, and the technology that powers it came from somewhere else, somewhere that might be paying attention to what we've done with their gift or theft or whatever it was. If you see strange lights in the sky, moving impossibly fast, leaving pulsing contrails, there's a chance it's an Aurora, but there's also a chance it's something else. Something that wants their technology back, or wants to see what we've become. To my daughter Emily, if you're reading this, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth before now. I'm sorry for all the years I was absent, all the secrets that built walls between us. Everything I did believing I was protecting you. I hope you can understand. To the people still working in those underground levels at Groom Lake, I know you think you're protecting humanity. Maybe you are, but secrets this big don't stay buried forever. And when the truth comes out, and it will, we should be the ones to tell it, not have it forced upon us. The Aurora flies almost every week from what I can track through amateur aviation monitoring networks. They've built more aircraft, refined the technology, expanded the program. They're preparing for something. And after receiving Dr. Chen's message, I think that something is closer than any of us want to believe. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if this testimony will change anything or if I'll disappear into some classified facility for the rest of my life. But I flew an aircraft at the edge of space that humanity didn't entirely build. I saw things that challenged everything I thought I knew about our place in the universe. And I'm done staying silent. The Aurora Project is real. Area 51 is real. And we are not alone in developing the technology that will define our future. This is Captain Marcus Webb, test pilot, patriot, and truth teller. If I vanish after this, you'll know why, and you'll know that everything I've told you is true.